What is up, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here at NovaCare Complex with Mike Kaye for the latest episode of the No Huddle Show. It wouldn't be a week if the Eagles weren't somehow tied to a former Jaguars player since you started on this job. We're going to get into that in a little bit. The biggest news, I think, is that they're rebooting Saved by the Bell, which I'm still trying to process because it's a very weird... I mean, it makes sense because they reboot everything now, but do you really need to reboot that?
No.
But
when I wake up in the morning...
NBC's new streaming service, did you see the name of it, by the way?
No.
Peacock. That's what they're calling their streaming service.
Weird that they would take their nickname.
Good one. That was pretty good. Somebody tweeted, like, so what do you Netflix and chill is a thing? Like, what's the phrase for Peacock? Peacock and chill.
Well, this podcast has already gotten away from us.
Anyway, but Saved by the Bell that was like a corny show when it was on. Like, I know Full House was really successful for Netflix, is why they did it. But that also was terrible when it was on. Sorry if that's a controversial take, but it was not a good TV show.
In fairness,
I love Saved by the Bell, by the way.
It's a byproduct of our generation.
Yeah, true.
Nostalgia is one of the great human weaknesses, second only to the net.
Oh, you only said that for the 50th time.
Yeah, but it's true.
Dwight Schrute.
It's true. That's why I talk about former Eagles so much.
That's true, and it does well when you write about it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, but yeah, well, so before we get into Jalen Ramsey, who I know everybody wants to talk about, we should cover some injury stuff, because the Eagles are, as you know, banged up. So today, Doug Peterson switched the regular practice to a walkthrough, which is fairly strange for an early season Wednesday practice, because Wednesday is usually when they do their most install, a lot of the game plan work, and then they only have 2 practices the rest of the week, and it usually gets lighter as the week goes on. So it was a strange decision. His explanation had a lot to do with how banged up they are, as expected. The conspiracy theories are running wild when it was initially announced that maybe Carson Wentz was more injured than they had let on. Doug's reaction to a question about that was maybe a little over the top, like he was planning on reacting that way. But he basically was asked if Carson would have practiced today for a regular. He's like, Carson? Yeah, he's fine. So he says Carson's fine. He got hit early in that game, and it seemed to affect him. Carson said it was only his wind getting knocked out of him. He was checked for a concussion. Sounds like he's okay.
Yeah, I mean, when they made the switch, I kind of figured it had to do with the quick turnaround, not necessarily the injuries, but the fact that they're going to play on Sunday and then turn around, go on the road on Wednesday to play on Thursday.
In Green Bay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
Bad timing for all those injuries, for sure.
When you have a road Thursday game, it not only makes the week shorter, but it makes it even shorter than your opponents because you actually have to travel. So you're taking on...
Yeah, road Thursday games are especially tough.
They're probably going to practice Tuesday, and that'll be it.
Yeah.
So, because you got to give the guys a day off on Monday, and then, you're turning around, and it's one of those things where you already have 5 notable injuries. 4, maybe, if you don't count Corey Clement as being a notable injury. And then you got to turn around and kind of maneuver the roster. You're basically maneuvering the roster this week for this week and next week, and I think that that's something that the Eagles are going to have to deal with pretty handedly.
So, to go through the guys that are their status is most in question, the safest one to say he's not going to play is Timmy Jernigan. Sounds like he's going to be out a while, probably a month was the report. And when Doug admits that somebody's going to be a little longer, it means they're out for a while. Mm-hmm. Alshon Jeffery was reported by Rappaport that he probably won't play this week. There's a chance he doesn't play the Packers one, but that was a little less concrete. But I would be surprised if he played this Sunday. DeSean Jackson, I reported this yesterday. He's been dealing with an abdominal strain since before the season. It wasn't bothering him enough to keep him out. Obviously, he was great in week 1. He felt fine going into week 2. Then I think he maybe aggravated a little bit, and now they're kind of taking it easy. And it sounds like the target date for him to come back is the Jets game in week 5. It's a target. It's not necessarily locked in. I know Tim McManus from ESPN reported that he had a chance to do surgery on it that would have kept him out 6 weeks, and he said no to the surgery. So my impression is that they're going to take it easy with him over the next 10 days, which would mean he would miss these next 2 games. And then depending on how he's feeling after that, be full go for the Jets game. Dallas Goedert, we're still not really sure about. His happened before the game, and he wasn't technically declared out right away, but it seemed like he was. And Corey Clement has his shoulder in a sling, his arm in a sling, which isn't a good sign. So out of that whole group, do you think any of them play?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, this week, no.
Yeah, this week. No.
I think Jeffrey will play against
the most
Packers.
recently.
Yeah.
Goddard's a concerning one a little bit because that was an injury he dealt with in the preseason.
Yeah, and they basically put him in bubble wrap for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that didn't help, clearly.
Yeah, or it just,
and Doug said it was the same injury, by the way.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, but you look at, soft tissue injuries. Look at what happened with Darren Sproles. Just because he's 150 years old doesn't mean he's the only one that can retweak an injury or what have you. It's concerning for sure. They promoted Alex Ellis from the practice squad so he could take first team or he could take 53-man roster reps.
I mean, he's probably going to be the number 2 tight end this week.
Yeah, I would say that's a safe bet. They could also still bring up Josh Perkins because I think week 2 showed you how much once one thing snowballs with pass catchers, it can,
And they like using Perkins as like a split out wide guy too, so that makes sense. Yeah,
he would basically be insurance at wide receiver and tight end. I could see them also signing a wide receiver, but people talked about Greg Ward, people talked about Jordan Matthews,
Marcus Green.
Yeah, Marcus Green would be interesting because he could give
especially if DeSean's out for 2 weeks. Yeah,
he could give you kind of those Bryce Treg reps. Treg's reps. I'm
Bryce,
sorry, Mark.
Treg reps.
Look, it's not ideal. It's still just week 3. I think the Lions are very, very beatable, even though they haven't been beaten this season. They're 1-0-1.
Yeah. But the win was against the...
It was against the Chargers. It was at home.
Banged up Chargers, and they tied the Cardinals, who might be the second worst team in the league. So
right.
Yeah.
So, again, I think, this is also a team you can run on. I know I said that last week about the Falcons, but we'll see. I think you have 2 weeks of understanding of what Miles Sanders can do and where he needs to grow, and I think that can help you in your game planning. You can't just say week 1's a fluke now. You know what I mean? So I think the Eagles are going to have a tough time determining their 46-man group, even though they have all these injuries.
Because they have so many guys that there's going to be injured guys that take up an active roster spot, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do with, maybe we talked about this the other night, but the superficial guys. If you have 10 offensive linemen, you have 5 linebackers, you have 5 safeties. Are you going to cut some of those guys? Are you going to put Mailata on IR? What are you going to do?
We should find that out in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate too much just because we're doing this right now. We'll talk more about it probably Friday, but my point to you is, they already decided to move the corner, Greg James off the roster to bring up Ellis. You're probably going to see 2 or 3 more of those moves.
It's a lot of minor moves to fill the depth chart out. I think they should be okay with that defensive tackle this week, probably. You can do 3 guys, and you have all the defense. Like Josh Sweat, they started using a little inside. We know Brandon Graham can play inside. We know Vinny Curry can play inside. So I'd be surprised if they even called up someone like Bruce Hector. I think they should be okay with Akeem Spence as the 3rd guy, probably.
Well, I think they're going to practice that, and hopefully
and then they'll see. Yeah.
The thing I will say about these roster moves is the reason why I think you will see more roster moves is because you aren't planning. I got to stress this. You aren't just planning for this week. You're planning for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's the next 2. Like that. Having that short week makes it really difficult for these guys to get into practices, and usually you need a practice to play.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have opportunities on the roster. If Clement, I don't want to speculate about the length of Clement's injury, but if he needs to be put on IR or Jernigan needs to be put on IR and you can bring him back, then that's what you do, because you have to go at least 1-1 in these next 2 games. I mean, the Cowboys play the Dolphins, and they're already 2-0 in the division. You need to be able to kind of keep pace. And so I think a lot of these decisions are pressing because you want to start off the first quarter at least 2-2. If you get in that 1-3 category, it's going to be a tough uphill climb, even though the Giants and the Redskins are bad.
Yeah, and, even just I know since we're a few days out from it, it's still just in reflection, just wild, just how everything played out on Sunday, especially with these injuries. Mike Grove said yesterday that so Nelson Aguilar went out briefly at the end of the first half for concussion protocol. If he hadn't played, they were going to play Darren Sproles at wide receiver, a 36-year-old who barely even played in the game otherwise.
He did get some snaps.
He did.
At wide receiver.
He didn't get any touches at all.
Yeah.
Actually. Which goes to show you just week to week how different the running back things. Although they might only have 3 now, so because it might not to be a doctor or anything, but I'm pretty sure it's not a good sign if you're in a sling 2 days after a game. Yeah, I feel like it's safe to say that's a bad sign. But that's why you'd think they would either sign Perkins or Ward or a receiver or something, because you can't really afford to get in that situation. Because if they lose Aguilar, Mac Hollins, or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you need to dress 4 wide receivers. There's no doubt about that. I think there's been some speculation that they could bring up another running back just to have.
Boston Scott would be that guy.
Yeah, Boston Scott would be that guy. I'm interested because it's very clear how they feel about Alex Ellis. They're picking him over
Perkins. Yeah,
he's their 54th guy, but I don't really get a feel for how they feel about the rest of the practice squad. And I also don't. Obviously, they like Nick Herbig. Obviously, they like Matt Pryor. But
do you need to keep both of them? Yeah.
Right. How much do you like them?
And do you put Mailata on IR was the other one? Yeah.
And something important to watch, and we'll talk about this later. Let's say you get a good offer for Big B. Matt Pryor is the only guy that can play multiple positions involving tackle and guard of those young backups that you know for a fact can play, at least fill the position. Do you risk Matt Pryor to the waiver wire? Because that's something also to consider as well.
He seems like a guy a team might claim just because there's so many teams that need offensive linemen right now.
Well, and I think Stoutland has a reputation that if he likes a guy, it's kind of like similar to the Patriots. And the Patriots got a guy who's a
the teams are going to claim them.
Chance,
or if the Patriots are claiming a guy, everybody else is like, wait, why didn't we do that?
Right, exactly.
So those are the only injured guys, I believe, that we know of at least. I wonder I'm curious if Camus starts working his way back in a little more this week. Today you can't really judge because it'll be like an estimation when we get the injury report. But
my understanding. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
my understanding of the situation is that the target is the Jets game.
So that seems like that's when not everybody, but these guys, I think that's the game when everybody returns. So they try to survive the next 2 weeks, basically.
Which is why these next 2 weeks are so vital. If you have all your guys back, so DeSean's back, Camus back, Goedert and Jeffrey, let's say they're all back to make that run, you want to be able to maintain some sort of momentum. Packers are going to be a tough out on the road. I think this Lions game is
you need to split these two games at least. And if you go 2-0, then you're feeling really good about yourself.
Correct.
And if they go 0-2, then all of a sudden they're 1-4, right?
Yeah.
So or 1-3. 1-3. Sorry, math is hard.
It is. I mean, this is not the powder puff game, but this is the easier of the two when you consider how good the Packers defense has been and the fact that they have Aaron Rodgers. And if you're out all these offensive weapons, it's going to be hard to win in a shootout if that's what it comes to. So the Lions, low scoring, defensive struggle. I think that the Eagles have the juice to win that game. Also, if you don't think Zach Ertz is ready to rip the world apart after
the way he took everything on himself,
yeah, he's gonna be ready to play.
It's gonna be interesting to see how they split up because especially now that they have the full week. Well, they're not having Wednesday, I guess, so it's not really a full week, but of Carson working with, especially JJ, I think. I'm curious to see how much a part of the offense he is, and I would imagine Zach Ertz, if you have Zach Ertz in fantasy, you should be feeling pretty good this week because he's going to get a lot of targets. It's going to be like last year, even to another extent. I guess if you think those first 2 weeks last year, it was Ertz, Aguilar, and a bunch of guys too, so it's kind of similar. Although I would say Arcega-Whiteside is more talented than... who they have, Marcus Wheaton, Kamar Aiken. I did like DeAndre Carter, but he's more talented than DeAndre Carter. It is crazy to think about. Just a year ago, that was their receiving core in a game.
Yeah,
and it should have been no surprise that they lost that Buccaneers game, honestly. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see the workload distribution this week. I tweeted this last night. I did not expect Jordan Howard to become the play him more or we riot player. I guess that just happened because Miles Sanders has been getting the touches and hasn't been doing much, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But do you think they rectify that this week? He seems like an obvious guy to get more touches.
So, like I said, you can run on this Lions team. Yeah. The Lions, I think, have given up 249 rushing yards in the last 2 games. It's about 125 per contest. I think his ground and pound will work well against the Lions. I still think that he and Sanders have pretty similar, workloads, but I think you've got to get Howard going earlier. You notice in the Falcons game, they couldn't establish the run because the offensive line was not blocking well. The Lions have a good defensive line. Trey
Flowers?
Yeah, Trey Flowers is really good against them.
Gave him a big contract.
He's a good edge setter. and he can play the run really, really well. Alshon Robinson's a pretty good run stopper, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that they are a good run defense, but I'm wondering if the first couple of weeks are a feeling out process for them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, we can transition to the thing that everybody wants to talk about right now. Mm-hmm. You wrote a good story today because you covered Jalen Ramsey in Jacksonville.
Thanks, Dad.
So Jalen Ramsey, according to reports, requested a trade. He wouldn't admit to that at his press conference that he had. I believe it was yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. He's an emotional player, obviously, and he's outspoken. And those are the main knocks against him. I guess the locker room fit is the main knock against him. But talent-wise, there's probably not a better corner in the NFL, or at the very least, he's one of the 5 best. He would be the best corner the Eagles have had in a long time. It sounds like they're looking for 2 first-round picks. I don't imagine the Eagles will give that up. I would give up a first for him. I don't know how much more than that. I haven't really thought about a trade package or anything like that. But what have you made of all the idea Jalen Ramsey gets traded soon? I think Schefter said it's possible this week. I don't see that happening because they play on Thursday, right?
Yeah, there was another report by Ian Rappaport that said that the target would be Friday if it were.
Yeah, so after the game, yeah.
So
what do you make of all this, and what do you make of the Eagles as a potential partner?
So Jacksonville is an interesting locker room. They're full of young players. There's only one real definitive true blue leader in that locker room with Nick Foles out, and that's Calais Campbell. The Eagles have 6 Calais Campbells as far as leadership and personality in locker room, authoritarianism, I guess you could say. Look, Jalen has a defensive coordinator who is in his first tenure as a defensive coordinator who adapted his defense from Gus Bradley, who was obviously fired and terrible as a head coach. And they play a lot of cover 3. So does pretty much everybody in the league, but they play a lot of zone coverage. Jalen Ramsey is a guy who can win in man, zone, press, off.
He can play anywhere you need him to, yeah.
He even DJs bar mitzvahs. He is he can do
Man, I would go to that bar mitzvah.
I would too, awesome. To be honest with
That'd
you.
Be amazing.
Actually, somebody should text him about that. That might be actually a really good side business, especially if he comes to Philly. But look, he's a guy that wants to get paid. He's got a big market personality.
He has one more year after this year on his contract.
Correct.
For $13 million, I believe.
Yeah, it's his 5th year option.
Yeah.
I will tell you that front office adores him and his talent. It's just one of those situations where sometimes you get the vibe that a guy doesn't want to be there. And I don't think it's all coaching staff. I think you also have to look at the fact that he is a big market personality in a very small market.
He did fight with Doug Marrone during the game. Argued, I should say. And then be held back, but...
He's an emotional guy. Look, I once saw him in 2016 cry on the sideline because the Lions were blowing up the Jaguars. He wants to win. I think personality... A lot of people think that Jalen's personality stuff is overblown. I don't think that's 100% true. I've been around him. If he is not happy, you know it. Yeah. It's felt. That said, during the 2017 run to the AFC Championship game, he was a vocal leader. He was very, very good with his teammates. He kept a lot of guys together when there were mistakes. He's a guy that if he's in a winning situation and a veteran locker room, I think he could thrive. I said this earlier on Twitter. If he's traded to a team like Philly, who's been very good for a long time.
And have a reputation for being good.
Yeah. Right. He knows that, do they need him? No. To be a contender? No. Is having him very good for their chances? Yes. So it's more of a respect thing. He's not coming into a situation where he has to be the face of the franchise. And I talked to Malik Jackson about this, and he was open about it in his press conference. He liked the fact that he didn't have to be the guy. It wasn't all on him. And I think...
In Philly, you're saying.
Right, as opposed to Jacksonville. And I think that I think Jalen wants the attention, but he also realizes it's not all on his shoulders.
Yeah, he doesn't want it all on him, yeah.
Right. If they lose, it's not because Jalen Ramsey. You know what I mean? So, I think he'd be a great fit for this team. From your perspective on a trade package, I think first, third, and Big B would get it done, personally.
Well, so I was going to ask you, what would be the most you would give up? Say the Eagles offer them that and they counter with X? Like, what's the most you would go?
I'd give a 1 and a conditional 2, and the 2 would become a 3 if he doesn't sign an extension before the draft.
So if the Jaguars are like, we'll take a 1 this year and a 2 the year after that, would you do that? Like it's just straight 2.
I'd want like a 4th or a 3rd.
Like the Eagles get something back.
Yeah. But look, here's the thing: the Eagles are considered playoff contenders. They're considered Super Bowl contenders. They're going to probably have a later pick.
Yeah, exactly. Which makes the need to put another pick in there probably.
Yeah, there was
although the Chiefs are the other team, and they would have probably an even worse pick than the Eagles.
There's also a report out there by ESPN that an NFC team offered a 1st and a 5th. To me, I'm not going to confirm that that's the Eagles, but if I
sounds like them.
It sounds like them. I think a 1st and a 5th and like maybe Sidney Jones would potentially get that done. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
it would make sense for the Eagles to include one of their young corners because you really would have too many at that point. So
I think what's weird about this is a lot of people nationally do not watch Jaguars games, and that's why I think like my perspective.
I feel like a lot of people locally probably don't either.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like my perspective needs to be defended a little bit, but like. Listen, Jalen's the best player that franchise has probably ever had, outside of maybe Tony Baselli.
Yeah, in terms of pure talent, yeah.
Yeah, and he is beloved.
Like in Jacksonville, you're saying?
Yeah, he can do anything. Like, he could come in and pee.
Oh boy,
in public.
Where are you going with this? Okay,
like he could do
just
anything.
Pee. He could pee.
He could just take a pee.
And people would be like, "Whoa,
like this
he did
guy,
that great."
Well, I was gonna do something funnier, but I realized it's a family show. But look, Jalen's a guy that has really transcended the organization. Like
in terms of star power,
yeah, he is his own brand. Like, when you talk about the Jaguars, Jalen Ramsey is the first player that comes to your mind. And,
Nick Foles, come on.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing.
I know.
You bring up Nick Foles. I think that makes trading Jalen Ramsey...
Because of the injury?
Smart. Yeah. I think with Jalen Ramsey not seeing that this team's 0-2, they're probably going to start 0-4.
Who are their next 2 games?
They play the Titans on Thursday, and I don't remember who the 4th game is.
I'll look it up. You keep talking.
But, thanks. But I think Jalen and the Jaguars can both see that this season's
Broncos is the week after that, so they're beatable, but yeah.
Excuse me. I think the Jaguars and Ramsey can both see that where the season is going, and so it's worth trying to get assets for a malcontent who doesn't want to be there, who is a blue chip player, and you might as well go for it. I mean, look, he's a guy that's going to get paid better than any other cornerback in the league. He's going to be, Xavier Howard makes $15.05 million. He's going to probably make $16 million. Jalen Ramsey.
You mean on his next contract?
Yes. Yeah. So I think when you look at what. Also, right now he's buy low. Like he's making $3.7 million as a base salary this year, and you're going to pay even less for that because he's played 3 games.
Yeah,
you're probably only paying like
a prorated portion.
Right, you're only paying probably like $2.8 million. So again, I think when you look at his talent and how dynamic he is, and what he can do for the secondary, he's a guy that can shut down one side of the field. And that'll help your pass rush. It'll help your safeties. It'll help your other corners because, the other corners can get safety help now, and you don't have to worry about, like, splitting the field and all that stuff. Ramsey doesn't make a ton of plays in the ball. I think he has 9 career interceptions. But he'll break up a pass, like that. He can,
and teams won't throw in his direction also.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's gotten thrown on a little bit more in recent years, but yeah, he's a guy that can really just change the dynamic there. And I think if the Jaguars feel like they are slipping, especially with Nick Foles not being able to come back till week 11, it's time to make that trade because when Nick Foles does get back, you don't want to have that bad locker room juju heading into next season too. I think this is a preemptive strike. If you trade him, knowing that he probably doesn't want to re-sign, or 2, you don't know if you want to re-sign him because of the way he's handled this situation. And I think the Jaguars fans are killing the organization right now, and I totally understand. But from their perspective, if at this point there's no going back.
Do you think he's on the Jacksonville Jaguars at this time next week?
No.
So you think he gets? What's your predict? Do you think Chiefs?
Chiefs or Raiders?
Raiders
would be my guess. But I think the Eagles are that very close third team.
Man, so we were talking about this. I think we were texting about it yesterday. The Eagles are often, because Howie Roseman calls everybody, and I'm sure that they leak that the Eagles are interested in X player all the time. Doesn't mean they're ever actually offering, but my point being, it comes out that they're interested in so-and-so. You know, it happened with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, with Minkah Fitzpatrick. I can't even think of a single time where they were connected to a player and they actually traded for him. Like, if you think about, Jordan Howard would be the closest, but I don't even think there was any reports about it. That was just more like everybody tying him to them.
I think there was one report, but it was more of like a feigned
But he's not that level of player anyway. But Michael Bennett came out of nowhere. J.J. definitely came out of nowhere. Golden Tate came out of nowhere. Golden Tate's probably the biggest name one out of those, like, at the time of the trade. Mm-hmm. And there was no reports linking them leading up to it. So, like, Howie Roseman's, he's not leaking to everybody that he's interested in somebody. So that's why I tend to hesitate when there's reports of Eagles are one of the interested teams, or they called. Well, yeah, they called because Howie calls about everybody. But so, like the Minkah Fitzpatrick one, I don't think they were probably ever going to trade a first for that guy.
I agree.
And even if they did, it was probably going to be a worse first than the Steelers one anyway. That was a weird trade. But that's my main hesitation about everybody tying the Eagles to Ramsey. Like, if Howie's going for a guy, he's doing it with his non-B silence, as you labeled it.
So speaking of non-B, Howie and this organization have been trying to find a true blue, like blue chip corner since he's been in power, both terms. And I think this is such a this is such a rare case that you kind of throw some restrictions to the wind. I'm not saying that you go all out and risk the future, but when I look at Jalen Ramsey and I see a premier player who's only 24, and you definitely have him under control for the next 2 years, and you offer a big market vibe, and you have some in-house relationships with them, I just kind of think it's the move to make. I think this you listeners of this podcast, regular listeners, know that I was not huge on the Fitzpatrick trade. I was not huge on a Clowney trade. I'm not the type of person that when you see just a name guy, I jump to that stuff. But having my experiences with Jalen, knowing what he brought to the Jaguars, and also knowing what he is as a talent, I just think it's a slam dunk if you can get him for less than 2-1s.
So, if they got Jalen Ramsey, I think that helps their defense obviously quite a bit. But I think whether this team is a Super Bowl contender will come down to the offense. Number one, staying healthy. Carson Wentz playing better for 4 quarters. Them starting a bit faster. Like that's maybe the if I was going to say why they wouldn't do it is because whether they win the Super Bowl is not going to come down to Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think that
I think they should trade for him, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, if they don't, I could see that being a justification. Like, we would rather improve on offense or something like that.
And my counter to that would be that Howie Roseman constantly says that he has to keep his foot on the pedal and be aggressive. Well, this secondary is ranked 31st in the league right now.
They haven't been. I mean, Cindy Jones was okay last week, but otherwise hasn't been great.
Yeah, it has not been good, Bob. And I think you can't. This is the 3rd year in a row where they've been in the bottom half of the set, in passing defense, and I think you need to be able to, or 2nd year in a row, sorry. I think you need to be able to adjust that. And good corners do not come available. And you don't want to regret this. I mean, like, Jalen's a guy who probably will command low-end quarterback money because he's that good. And I think you have the right locker room here. I think Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox,
Malcolm Jenkins,
Carson Wentz, all those guys. He respects this locker room. I know that for a fact because when he was at the Pro Bowl in 2017 before the Super Bowl, I asked him, hey, who do you have in the Super Bowl? And he said, well, I really respect Nick Foles. Ronald Darby's my guy. I like what they're doing out there. Like,
I mean, if you remember his article where he criticized all the quarterbacks, two of the only ones he didn't were Nick Foles and Carson Wentz.
Right. I mean, people want to play with Carson and or on the same team as Carson. And look, he knows Josh Sweat. He knows
from Florida State,
Yeah, he knows Timmy Jernigan. He knows Ronald Darby. He knows Nigel Bradham.
A lot of Florida State guys.
He went to high school with Derek Barnett.
It's the new West Virginia here.
Yeah, I mean, there are guys here that he knows and is comfortable with. I mean, Malik obviously is out right now, but he played with him in Jacksonville. He played with Alex Ellis in Jacksonville. Whether they knew each other is a whole other thing.
I'm sure Alex Ellis knew him.
Yeah, yes, he was aware of his presence. But yeah, I also think Jalen gives this team a different type of swagger than they already have. He's the type of guy that really understands the psychology of playing corner. He's a guy that will talk
He's an all-time. I think he said in college it was where he used to message the opposing team receivers' girlfriends. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
he's genius. Like, why not?
I mean, he's a guy who got into a fight with AJ Green because he got into AJ Green's head. Like, he's a guy that knows
Love that out of him.
He knows how to disrupt wide receivers mentally, and
it's all part of the
people
game,
make a big deal out of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside not having a week of practice. If you think that messes with you, imagine a cornerback getting into your brain and literally just ruining
especially
your day.
A young guy. Like if the Eagles were going against Jalen Ramsey this week, he would have a good time.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So again, I think Jalen Ramsey would be a slam dunk if they could get the right deal. I don't think that's in my perspective, and I think I've said this before, Howie goes into deals wanting to win deals. He says he doesn't. He just wants the right player. But if you typically look at the deals, they're
it's structured in a way that he, like the DeSean deal where he got DeSean and a draft pick.
Right.
Yeah.
He structures deals in the way where it looks publicly like he wins. The way the agents kind of leak contracts to make them look better.
Yeah. They say the numbers when it's not like the actual numbers or whatever.
Right. So again, this isn't one that I think you need to win. This is one where if you can get Jalen Ramsey, go get him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Now, you brought up the Chiefs. The Chiefs haven't paid Patrick Mahomes yet.
Which is why they can probably afford this, yeah.
They are by far the co-favorite for the Super Bowl with the Patriots. And, the Patriots just added Antonio Brown. It's time to get somebody who did a really good job.
And the Chiefs' defense still isn't great, so.
Right. But,
they spend a bunch of money this offseason.
If you watch what Jalen Ramsey did against Antonio Brown in 2 games in 2017, you're pretty much inclined to kind of go after him. I mean, Jalen did a really good job.
It seems like so the Jets benched Jamal Adams and Tremaine Johnson last week, and Jamal Adams doesn't seem very happy there. So I'm curious if the Jets start selling off parts, because they might go 0-6 with Luke Falk at quarterback, by the way.
Luke Falk, I said this to you, is probably a bottom 3.
I think you said it on the podcast, actually, too.
He is so bad. Like, I can't even stress
I covered a kid named Brandon Dawkins at the University of Arizona. He was like an athletic guy, not a very good quarterback. He beat Luke.
Go figure.
So Luke Falk is from Logan, Utah originally. He transferred out to Southern California to play at this high school, Oaks Christian. He originally beat out Brandon Dawkins for the starting quarterback job in the week 1. Threw 3 interceptions. Brandon Dawkins took the job, never looked back, and Luke Falk went back to Utah. And then he eventually wound up at Washington State, where Mike Leach can make you or I throw for 4,000 yards in that air raid offense. He's not good. I was saying this to somebody earlier. Like, do you think Joe Douglas is regretting taking that job now? I mean, he got a lot of money and he got job security, but he's tying himself to Adam Gase also.
I think he's going to love having that top 3 pick. And
I guess we'll find out how much he likes or doesn't like Sam Darnold too.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
Josh Rosen's situation maybe.
Yeah. By the way, we need to start having like when somebody has like a down period, we should say transfers back to Utah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That just sounded great to me. I don't know. But yeah, I think Jamal Adams would be somebody I would have a tremendous.
I thought about that too. Yeah, and Tremaine Johnson, I looked at his contract and it's not good, so he's not a guy that you want to target. He has 3 years left, and there are a lot of money on it. So
yeah, I mean Jamal Adams.
But I just find it interesting that there's all these cornerbacks that are or defensive backs that are disgruntled right now.
Yeah, I mean,
it used to be receivers were the position. It seems like defensive backs have kind of taken over.
Yeah, DBs are divas.
Because I guess receivers have it a lot easier now in the modern NFL too. So.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a rarity that there's a number 1 cornerback on a roster. I think there's maybe 12 to 15 true number one corners in the league, and maybe 5 of them are legitimate shutdown corners. Again, I think that this secondary needs help, period. Yeah. Whether it's the third safety spot, whether it's an outside corner spot, they need to do something. Man, they can't just rest.
Do you think they'll cut Sendejo eventually? Like, he's just not good.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility of that. I also saw that in his official league photo, he's smiling, which kind of threw me off, I'll be honest.
So Doug was asked, Jim Schwartz was asked about the Calvin Ridley touchdown where he was clearly supposed to help. And so the question was asked about, like, was the safety supposed to help there? And instead of defending Andrew Sendejo, which normally Jim Schwartz would do for a guy he really likes, he just said there was a lot of reasons why the play didn't work out. Which I found Sendejo's still playing a lot, though. And he had that sack, which was more because of Schwartz than because of Sendejo. But, like, he's just one of those guys that the Eagles always have a guy or two like that every year. We're like, why are you playing that guy so much? Like, maybe they don't have any better options. Why do you have Cyprien if you don't think he's a better option? Like, I don't know. But that's... And so, just to reflect...
Cyprien also played with Ramsey.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. I forgot about that. So, to reflect one last time on the Falcons game, I wrote something about some of the interesting Pro Football Focus grades, and there were 3 guys in particular that stood out in a bad way. Ronald Darby, who we've talked about plenty, he had a bad game, one of the worst corners in the league. He gave up 2 touchdowns in the game, and the only other time he did that was in the Super Bowl, I believe. Mm-hmm. Number 2 was...
he was facing Gronk.
Yes. Isaac Seumalo was the worst graded offensive lineman in the entire NFL out of almost like 200 offensive linemen. He gave up 8 pressures, which is even worse than his Chiefs game that got him benched 2 years ago. Doug Peterson didn't seem to indicate they had any plans on benching him. I don't know who they would, I guess Vaitai, but Vaitai's never played left guard. So.
Well, and also Grady Jarrett
Jarrett's a beast.
You talk about 3 techniques. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
Aaron Donald, number 1. Fletcher Cox, number 2, Grady Jarrett, number 3. So, like, you're it's not like he wasn't playing an elite player.
But he's clearly, like, not good enough to defend an elite player.
Correct.
Is what we learned. I think he's still okay left guard. I think they're fine with him.
Yeah, he's fine.
And the other one was Nigel Bradham, who has ranked, I think he was ranked the 3rd or 4th worst tackler in the NFL among linebackers through 2 weeks. I know we've talked about that a little bit, but it's not so much that it's surprising, maybe alarming is the right word, because he's the linebacker playing almost every snap.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm not sure that's surprising.
Yeah.
But, they've got some linebacker issues. And like I said, I think that Camus will be the main
once he's fully healthy
linebacker by midseason. But, rough.
And one other guy that needs to improve, we talked about Miles Sanders a little bit. Like the big thing, I think this happens with rookie running backs with his running style a lot, where they try and make plays where there aren't any, like going outside. Like, it's the Shady style thing where Shady even does that, has done that throughout his career where he tries too hard to do that, but he's so good at it. But Sanders needs to just run straight forward, which is what Mike Rowe basically said. And they still seem to have utmost confidence in him. And I thought he was going to break out a little quicker than he has. Maybe we should have tempered the expectations. The preseason flashed us a little too much. But, like, what's your expectation for him? Like, do you think they bump down his touches a little bit, or...
I just think they kind of isolate his touches to certain packages in certain situations.
Instead of being the guy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is part of the reason why he had a Shady-like run in the preseason, but I never bought the Shady hype. Shady is more talented than Miles Sanders. So, I mean, you just got to kind of go with it. He is a rookie running back. I mean, there are guys that struggle early on.
The expectation used to be that rookies don't play well right away, but now so many come in right away and are ready that, like... Everybody freaks out when a guy isn't ready. Right? Like John Ross, I think, is a good example right now because he, like his first 2 years, did nothing. I think he was banged up that rookie year. He actually trains with the same guy as DeSean Jackson. They're pretty close. But he's having like an amazing year right now. So you just need to give guys time, which is what we said with the corners. If they don't get any better, then they gave them the time, and then you move on because they didn't show enough. Mm-hmm. But I think development is...
Or you trade for Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah. or you skip the development, yes. Yeah. But I feel like that's underrated a lot of times where not all guys are ready right away.
Yeah, and you know, I think sometimes guys press too much as well. Yeah. That's what I think the problem is with Miles. It's not that Miles isn't talented. I just think he's trying to make a big play because you're conditioned to, right? Like, Josh Sweat played a role in the FSU defense where he was taught to read and react. You can still see him do that on film sometimes instead of just going and just rushing the passer. The same thing for Miles Sanders. When he was in college, he could find space or get through guys who were eventually going to work at Verizon Wireless. Like he was able to do stuff like that. So
yes, it's not college football anymore.
Right, exactly, and he's definitely having a welcome to the NFL sort of experience because he's averaging 2.5 yards per carry and 2.8 yards per catch.
He's only forced one missed tackle also.
Yeah, so I mean, look, it'll come to him. I think he's very talented. I just think it's you got to kind of adjust things and adjust your expectations now that you have 2 games, and I think Jordan Howard deserves more carries, and that's pretty much it.
All right, that's a good spot to end on. Send us some questions, comment, tweet at us. We'll do our preview pod on Friday as usual, and thanks for listening, guys.